Good afternoon and welcome to the show. This is UK Genesis. I am Ben Furphy.
And hi, I'm Gary Jones.
We have with us this week Vaughan Simons from Pilcrow and Pixel. So Vaughan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Vaughan, and I work under the name Pilcrow and Pixel. Been going for about just about a year. Been working on the web for about 17 years. That includes nearly a decade and a half at the BBC in new media, as it was when it started, and then on the web, and a couple of years on charity sites. And yes, went freelance in about April last year, working with Genesis and WordPress. And I guess my specialisms are design and editorial copywriting, less so development.
Hinted as so in the name?
Yes, exactly. Not only alliterative, but yeah, it kind of refers to what my preferences and specialisms are.
Well, where did you? Sorry, interrupt there early. Where did you kind of inspire to get that name Pilcrow and Pixel? I know from the actual things, but how did you come up with that?
I was just kind of thinking. I didn't want to go under my own name. I don't know why. I find that rather kind of boring. I don't know. But I just wanted to kind of have something in my name, and I looked around at sort of sites for web design and sites for copywriting and editorial and the kind of names they had, and yeah, I just wanted something that really was quite snappy and summed up the two areas I work in, because they're often, I guess, not two areas that sort of commonly go together. They often tend to be quite separate, so I wanted to kind of sum that up. And I think Pilcrow is a word that gets people wondering, because although many people know it, a lot don't. So it's kind of, I wonder what Pilcrow is.
They'll kind of recognise the symbol, or even if they don't know the name of that character.
Yeah.
Paragraph
exactly.
icon.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I managed to come up with a fairly decent logo for it, so I thought, yes, this is definitely the name I want.
Fair enough. So what I was going to say was, obviously you specialize in editorial and in design. Is that the only areas that you do, or do you do anything outside of it? If a client came to you and said that we were looking for a little bit of SEO, would you take that on, or are you strictly just editorial?
Oh, no. I mean, I suppose perhaps incorrectly, I regard SEO as part of editorial.
Yeah.
So yeah, the other areas would be SEO, social media. I've been involved with social media since it pretty much landed in this country in terms of Facebook and Twitter in about 2006. So I started doing social media at the BBC quite early, before they even had a social media policy, which got me into some trouble, but never mind. So yeah, social media, SEO. I'm kind of an all-rounder, but less so development, and I realise that,
Okay. Speaking of social media, if you've got any questions for Vaughan, do drop them onto the Twitter, or no, it was the Facebook, wasn't it? When it first started. Bad social media joke. Yeah, if you've got any questions for Vaughan, drop them on Twitter using the hashtag UK Genesis. Sorry, I couldn't get my words out there. Or tweet them at UK Genesis, and we will get round to them. So you said that you don't really do any delivery now. Probably running joke within WordPress and web design as a whole is that clients often can't get content to you, and that's usually the thing that holds everything up. What sort of approach do you take? Do you sort of allow clients, if they turn around and say, I'll do content myself, do you just let them do that? Or are they specifically coming to you because you can do content? Sort of what's the sort of thing there?
I find a lot of clients come to me without thinking about content in a way. They say they either need a new website or they need their website redesigned, redeveloped, relaunched, and a lot of them won't mention content at all. So I generally put it forward to them, what are you planning to do with the content? And you'll sometimes see a light bulb go on above their head. Oh, I've got to do something with content as well. and then I put it to them, that I can also work on their content if they want to, or they can work on it themselves. But if they're supplying their own content, early on I was a bit more, unfortunately, I think, relaxed with it, and it was like, yes, well, we can get the content as we're doing the site, but now it's strictly in my contract that I want the content before I will start work on the site, and then the site will fit into my schedule once I've got the content. So I'm pretty strict on that. If it's in terms of writing the content for their site too, I will work with them on the content before I start work on the site. So it's always content first.
Okay. When you speak to a client, sort of, have you ever had pushback from that type of approach?
Yes, I mean, I've had clients who say, "Oh well, I need the site design, but I can't get you the content yet," and I have to be fairly persuasive in saying, the driving force of a website is not ultimately the design, it's not ultimately its features, it's what's on the website in terms of content, and trying to impress upon them the important thing is content, and that yes, I can use dummy text, but if they want particularly specialized pages or layouts, I can use dummy text till I'm blue in the face, but then they'll come along with the content and say, well, I want it laid out particularly like this, and I've got to go back to square one in some cases. So it's impressing upon them that the content is something that comes at the end and just fits into the design of the website. The lead focus is the content.
Okay. And do you use any particular tools to sort of manage content delivery, or are you very much email based?
I try to use tools to manage content delivery. I will set up a shared Dropbox, and I will work with Basecamp, which I've known from previous jobs. But I find the issue is a lot of particularly smaller clients, they don't know those tools, and you can spend a long time actually just teaching them to use the tools. Even something like Dropbox. I mean, we all take Dropbox for granted, but it's surprising, but perhaps not, that a lot of clients will get confused by something even like Dropbox. So I try and gauge the knowledge of the client, and if they're not familiar with tools like that, then yes, it has to be email and Word documents. But if possible, I will use tools like Basecamp, Dropbox to share content, but it really does depend on where they're coming from in terms of knowledge.
Okay. So do you have different types of customers, or are they, do you find that one particular segment of customers is less tech savvy than others, or is it across the board in that, whatever industry you specialize in, you come across people who are tech savvy and can pick up Dropbox and Basecamp, within 5 minutes? Or?
There doesn't seem, unfortunately, to be a rule. I've had fairly successful small businesses, people with quite a few years' experience who don't understand things like Dropbox and Basecamp, and I've had individuals who just want their own individual site who get all that, and they've used it for their own projects. So unfortunately there isn't a rule. I wish there were, but because it would be easier then to have a company approach you and say, oh well, I can work with these tools and better collaborative tools rather than just relying on email and Word documents. But it's surprising. It depends who you're dealing with in an organization. Sometimes the person you end up dealing with is actually the most tech-savvy person there.
Okay. What can you describe who your typical client is, and also who your ideal client is?
I suppose typical client so far has actually I don't know that I've really had a typical client so far. It's been a mix of small businesses, community organizations, smallish community organizations, individuals, and arts bands, arts projects, that kind of thing. So there's not been one ideal sort of typical client really. It tends to be on the smaller scale. I've not had any huge organisations approach me yet.
Okay.
But ideal client is someone who's engaged with it really. You do unfortunately get the kind of clients who wants a new website and comes to you and hopefully gets you the content before you start the site, but then that's it. They kind of, yeah, I mean, it can be good. They kind of leave you to it, but on the other hand, they leave you to it to such an extent that you don't feel they're engaged. So I like a client who's engaged, who kind of, even if that means going back and doing a lot of tweaks, is more interested in the end design and the end content rather than just hands the project over to you, says get on with it, and then comes back to you at the end of it.
Okay. Do you use value pricing at all, or how do you price those projects?
I price by project, not hourly. So far, no, I'm very interested in using value-based pricing, but so far I haven't really had the kind of clients I could use that with. So it's on a to-do when I get the kind of clients who I can use that with. But so far it's been by project, and as I've gone on and done bigger, slightly better websites, I've increased my prices slightly, but it's always by project.
Okay. In terms of the type of clients who you work with, is that literally just end customers, or do you work with agencies at all?
No, I haven't done anything with agencies. I've done, since going freelance, I've done a couple of things with organisations whom I won't mention, that weren't actually WordPress related, but more putting together websites with their own content management systems and doing the copy for that. But they were organisations, not agencies.
Gary, muted.
Sorry. Anyone think I'm new to this or something? You said that you worked at the BBC. Do you think some of the knowledge and the skills and so on have had a direct impact, and that you can kind of reuse that knowledge and those skills in your current role?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I had quite an unusual path through the BBC in that I wasn't actually interviewed when I applied for a job there in 1997. I was interviewed for a job called a transmission assistant, which was, no offence to transmission assistants, but it's basically a glorified dog's body. It's kind of a secretary dog's body in the transmission area. And I was fortunate enough to be interviewed by someone who was leading up a unit to be involved with digital TV, which was then something on the horizon. And I was employed there within the new media department doing content for EPGs, which we now get on all our TVs, but were brand new then. So I kind of fell into web and new media by accident. And the longest site I worked on there was actually a disability website. I'm disabled myself. And it was quite an unusual. At the BBC, the work on the web is divided. There's very much content producers, which I was, technical teams, and design teams, and they all work together on projects. But once the site is finished, the focus is on a content team. But I worked on a disability website where, although there were over 10 CMSs in use at the BBC, none of them were accessible, and my two colleagues on the site were blind. So I found myself, and this is where I really learned HTML, CSS rather. I found myself kind of diving in and creating page templates from the original designs, and doing what were quite complex things as well as doing content editing. So I've got a kind of quite a hands-on approach, and I've learned quite a few things that perhaps if I'd gone the more traditional routes of the BBC, I wouldn't have done. And as regards content, I mean, the BBC have quite strict editorial standards, and you're supposed to know the big editorial guide from front to back. So yeah, it has made me quite stringent on content and grammar and style and all those things.
So
Interesting. Sorry, I was just going to quickly ask Vaughan, how many times have you had customers who've insisted that they were grammatically correct when you knew that they weren't, and what did you do to get past that
Um,
impasse?
it depends. I mean, I've had clients, not just clients, in fact, in jobs, I've had contributors who, insist their grammar and uh, linguistic foibles are correct, and they're not. But it really depends. It depends who you're working with. If it's not a business site, if it's kind of an informal site, then I think you have to leave a certain amount of leeway for the writer's own style. But yes, I have had clients where the content they supplied to me was, by my standards, not suitable, and I did say, well, I will sub-edit this content as part of my work on your site, and I will suggest that delicately that even though they want to take an informal tone, they've actually got language on the site which is grammatically incorrect, and point out that it's not a thing that a lot of people think about, but just in the same way we say that people judge a site by how it looks within the first couple of seconds of arriving on it. When they start reading content, if they start spotting errors, not everybody will, but many people will. I'm not alone in spotting errors in text content. They'll begin to judge your content on it. So it's in a way, I tie those two things together, and I say to them, yes, the look of your site, the feel of your site, the design of your site will be judged in the first couple of seconds, but within the first couple of minutes, once they start browsing your content, if they start spotting errors, they will judge the quality of your work on that as well.
do you prefer kind of the content creation, content editing side, either at the BBC or for yourself, or the design aspect of highlighting kind of the best parts of that content for other clients?
I have no preference. I like them both equally. I think that's why I enjoy both so much, because I really do like them equally. There's no sort of, oh, I want to get the content finished so I can concentrate on the design, or there's none of that. I genuinely enjoy them both equally because I see them as very interlinked.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got a few questions coming in on Twitter. So if you tag your questions for Vaughan at UK Genesis, then we will ask them. So question from Angie, Purple Baby Hippo, who we had on last week. What experiences have you had with other WordPress themes, and why do you choose to use Genesis?
Well, I've been using WordPress since 2006. I started blogging. I was quite an early UK blogger in about 2000, and I went through using Blogger and then Movable Type. And in 2006, I sort of switched my blog to WordPress, and got to know it quite well. And it was a couple of years later, 2008, 2009, that I started doing sites for friends and my own projects. And using WordPress when it was beginning to be used more as a CMS rather than just a blogging tool, and so designed sites rather than just blogs. And I haven't. I investigated frameworks. I looked at Headway. I looked at Ultimatum. I very briefly looked at Thesis. And I don't know. None of them kind of appealed to me. I think. And I did a couple of things with Theme Forest themes, and the reason I didn't like them was I just found myself taking out loads of stuff. I'd spend 2 days taking out all their sliders and tab table and just removing stuff until I thought, what's the point? I may as well have just started this myself. So the WordPress sites I did at first were HTML, CSS sites that I then moved into the WordPress structure. So no, I haven't actually used many different frameworks, themes. I discovered Genesis via Dynamic, actually. And I don't know why. I can discover Dynamic, saw that it was quite a good tool, although I've moved away from it now. But at first, it was quite a useful one. Like Genesis, it didn't really feature in my mind that, oh, I need Genesis to use dynamic. Genesis was just a thing I had to buy to use dynamic. But then when they launched Genesis 2.0, and I'd only been on dynamic for a little while, I started looking at the new themes they were doing, and I suppose it was the design initially that appealed to me. The design ethos they have, the very, sleek, minimalist look, and then started reading more about the framework and decided that it was, right for me, even though perhaps it's quite a developer-centric framework, Genesis. And as I say, I've got fairly good development skills now, but they're never going to be top notch. But even so, it's been quite a steep learning curve getting to know Genesis. It's the first theme I did with it, but I think the simplicity of it and the stripped back nature of it really appealed to me, both in terms of design, content, and less so development.
A question from Joe along those lines is, what do you think of the new Genesis author theme?
I quite like it. I'm actually just finishing an author site at the moment, and I was supposed to start it a little while ago, but then I heard about the author theme, so I thought I'll wait for the author theme to see what it's like. And in the end, I didn't use it. I do like it, and I think I will use it, but actually, I've done a couple of author themes previously using custom post types for their books, and actually I found the Author Pro content plugin, it's a plugin, isn't it, for the Author Pro theme, I found it actually slightly limiting. I don't think it's got, obviously you don't want a plugin to be massively crowded with lots of stuff, but I actually found that one rather limiting. So after downloading the author theme and looking at the plugin, I actually decided to go with my own theme based on Remobile, and also my own custom post type adapted from previous author themes, because I just felt it had a bit more in it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. I had a quick look at the author theme in terms from an accessibility point of view, and unfortunately, yet again, there were still very basic errors being made in terms of accessibility. There was the responsive menu icon was basically open div, close div, so nothing for screen readers to read and find out what that icon was supposed to represent or mean, and other accessibility issues as well. So unfortunately, it's something that Studio Press I don't think have quite got their head around in terms of the child themes that are coming out and the accessibility. Questions from Angie. She says, are you available to hire for copywriting services? And then a few minutes later she says, do you provide site maintenance, and if so, how many sites do you look after?
First, yes, I am available for copywriting services. Yes, I'm very, very happy to. And second question on maintenance, yeah, I do the maintenance for, I try, if possible, to have quite a long-term relationship with clients. I prefer it that way rather than just, the do your site then drop them. So I'm pleased to say, I'm beginning, because I've been running a year now, I'm beginning to get to the stage where I'm contacting clients and saying ongoing maintenance, having been through, whether it's 3 months or 6 months of looking after their site for them in the initial stages. I'm pleased to say they will want to kind of renew the relationship with me and carry on maintaining their sites. So yes, I've got a few clients who are on maintenance deals now, and my principle on that is that it's purely maintenance and minor tweaks, and that if they come to me and say, I want a whole new section of the site, that's a separate fee.
Okay, I mean, key sort of, I know that what people include in maintenance packages and sort of their ballpark figure that they charge for is a area of hot debate. Do you have like a standardized package, or do you tend to customize it based on what they're looking for? And if so, what sort of what does it look like?
My kind of standard contract for a maintenance package is up to 2.5 hours a month, looking over their sites, updating plugins, minor tweaks to, because some of the clients I do also look after their sites in terms of content, so uploading blog posts for them, but generally those are the clients who aren't updating their site much, so it might be one post a month, frankly. But yeah, it's generally updating plugins, checking the site for malware. It's the standard maintenance stuff, really. And all I say in my contract, and this is a bit of a nebulous area, I guess, but it's that I will do minor tweaks to the site. You know, if you want a small change to the color of a nav or something, then I can do that. But if you want more pages to the site, or you want a new section to the site, that will be a separate charge.
Okay. Gary, do you want to take over on the community questions?
Yep. Okay. Okay. So talking about kind of community, then we weren't, but let's talk about it now.
Sure.
Have you been to kind of any WordCamp? And if
No,
so,
I haven't.
no.
No, I haven't. I'm not. It sounds terrible. I'm community minded online. I'm not very community minded in person. And I have a physical disability, a mobility impairment, but I also have moderate Asperger's, and it makes big social kind of gatherings quite unsettling for me at times. So I would like to go to one, but I think it'll be a while before I do. But having said that, online, I mean, online I really enjoy the Genesis community. I think it's I've taken a look at kind of the wider WordPress community before, and again, because there's so many people using WordPress, it gets a bit big, whereas the Genesis community feels more manageable, I guess, to me. And particularly since the Slack group started up, I mean, I love that. I think it's fantastic, and everyone's really supportive, really helpful, and it may be looking at it idealistically, but everyone seems of quite a similar viewpoint. Not absolutely similar, but you know, they have a general similar approach to work, to design ethos, to working with clients, which feels kind of very upfront and honest, which I like. So yeah, online communities, fine. Yeah, at some point I'd like to go to a WordCamp, but I think it'll be a while yet.
Well, there is the WordPress London meetup, which, depending on whereabouts in London you are, would be relatively close to consider. Yeah. Is there anything within either the Genesis or the WordPress community that you'd like to see disappear and get rid of?
I don't know the WordPress community so well, as I say, I haven't really involved myself with that. Genesis community, no. I mean, it seems the only thing I recently didn't like, which I know a lot of people didn't like, was the furore over Sridhar charging for using his site, which, you know, just seemed ridiculous to me, and very offensive, really.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will absolutely hold my hands up and say that most of my code snippets originate from his site, and I wouldn't be nearly as familiar or confident with Genesis if it hadn't been for early on discovering his site and taking so many bits and pieces from it. So
it would be interesting to see how much of the world's Genesis websites contain SK underscore.
Yeah. If you could do a search, I think you'd find a lot of his stuff. I mean, I was looking back. I had to change something on a site I did shortly after I started, and I was looking back at the functions PHP file, and it was just SK underscore, SK underscore. It was almost embarrassing. It really was. So when there was the uproar over him charging, that annoyed me. The whole idea of getting stuff for free does, you know, when people have put work in. But I think particularly with him, where even just one cursory look at the site, you see how much he's done. I mean, the man's a robot. He really is.
How do you see WordPress changing in the next kind of 3 to 5 years?
I thought the interesting thing was Matt, however you pronounce his surname.
Mullenweg.
Mullenweg, okay. That's I thought the interesting thing was recently what he said about Jetpack. The kind of focus on Jetpack. Um, I've used Jetpack on a couple of sites. I don't know. I don't tend to like using it because I'm a bit of a control freak, and I find somehow sometimes the lack of customization in Jetpack a bit annoying, because particularly in the look of things, it can become a bit homogeneous if you always see, for instance, the same kind of Jetpack features again and again and again. But that's just me. So I like to try and get a slightly different look to things. But I think there will be more of a focus on that and putting in perhaps quite more complex features that I can't imagine yet what they might be. But I think there'll be a lot more focus on that. Yeah, I think that's probably the main development that's going to come to pass.
Excellent. Okay, question from Richards on Twitter says, what do you think about the accessibility in Genesis?
As you just said with Modern Author, I think it could be better. I'd like, that's the main thing in the next version of Genesis. I'd really like to see them tighten up, because at the moment, I install Genesis Accessible, I install WP Accessibility, I check things with 10 on. I also, tab around and check things from my knowledge of how screen readers work. And I know perfectly well that some of my Genesis sites, particularly the older ones, have their accessibility failings. But I think, to me, that's something that throughout the years I've heard, at the end, people say, oh, we must make it accessible. And it needs to be accessible from the very start. So I'd really like to see Genesis from the outset made much more accessible, so that not that developers and designers don't have to think about it, but so they don't have to compensate for it with other things.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with that. It's it's going to be just like responsiveness. I think we've probably mentioned it on the show before. Just like responsiveness is part and parcel now of most websites, then accessibility should be from the very beginning. So, do you do much with kind of internationalization and localization, or all your clients kind of British English users?
British English. I haven't done anything with that yet. No, I mean I'm aware of it, but nothing done with it yet.
Okay, so we've just gone over halfway through the show. If you've got a question for Vaughan, then tag it with UK Genesis hashtag, and we'll get it answered. There's a couple more questions on Twitter, or Ben, did you want to have some questions?
Sorry, I'm going to apologise. I am suffering quite badly from toothache at the moment, which is why I'm a little bit more quiet than what I normally am. There was one that I did see from Angie, which is something that I know that I've made mistakes with in the past, and I'd be curious to see what your opinion on it is. How long does your average project take, and how many do you take on at once?
Average project. It's a bit of a difficult one to say, because I've had projects which took far too long, and others which did remarkably quickly. I would say the ideal would be somewhere between 10 to 14 days.
How many hours would you say that is, roughly?
I really, it's probably, let me think, probably somewhere between 40 and 50 hours gone over those days, because I don't work on them constantly. But I know I'm a bit of a slow worker, and I'm also a bit obsessive about detail, unfortunately. And I know that's something I need to knock on the head sometimes, but I am that git, frankly, who will sit there for an hour obsessing over, whether the padding here ought to be 10 pixels or 12 pixels, and thinking that actually anyone will notice. But that is my stupid obsessive detail. So I know I spend too long on projects, and I need to tighten that up. There was another part to that question. I rambled and I forgot where it was.
How many do you work on?
Oh, how many do I work on? Generally, it will be 2 actually working on them at a time, and I may have a third one that's in the initial stages of discussion. But actually designing, developing, building it, I generally can't really concentrate adequately on more than 2.
Okay, I mean, how do you deal with clients who, we all have them, unfortunately, and I know when I've spoken to Jennifer Bourne in the past, she's always gone, Ben, it's all about the process. You've got to make sure that they understand the process as well as you do. But ultimately, you'll always come across a situation where the client holds things up. How do you deal with that particular impasse and making sure that it doesn't, sort of end up in a situation where 6 months down the line you've got 4 or 5 projects that are on hold and they all come back to you at once?
Yeah, I had which I'm sure I ranted about on Slack at the time, before there was a rant channel, and I'm pretty sure I might have taken this idea from you, Ben, or from another discussion. But I had a client who I started working with in September last year, and it was only a small site for a kind of financial consultancy. Started working on September. I had the site built pretty much ready to go, bar a few tweaks in 10 days. It didn't actually launch till the end of January because I was waiting for copy. I was waiting for the client to approve things. It was just ridiculous. Since then, I have put in my contract pause fee. I think it was you.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah.
And I took that idea from you. There is now a pause fee, and I've made it quite a generous pause fee. I've at the moment said, if things are held up longer than a month, I may shorten that, but at the moment it's a month, and after that I reserve the right to charge a fee of 25% of the overall charge of the fee for the site, and when they want me to work on the site again, it will have to fit back into my schedule. So I put that clearly in my contract. So far, touch wood, I haven't had another instance of that, but it was that particular client, and then seeing the discussion about it on Slack, again, Slack being very useful, that made me put that pause fee into my contract, because yes, it is something that I've experienced quite painfully.
I think it's another thing we can all thank Curtis McHale for.
Yeah.
I think quite a few of the good ideas that come into the Slack group are through Curtis's.
That's very true. I started reading into Slack as well. So.
We've got another question from Richard that's slightly relevant to this. Do you charge differently for development and design versus content creation, or do you have a single fee?
I mean, I work with a single project fee, but yes, if they come to me wanting, they're not going to supply their own content, or they want me to edit a lot of their content, or they want me, to write the content from scratch, then I will charge more. I don't, I must admit, tend to think of it in terms of a particular amount for design, a particular amount for development, a particular amount for content. But yes, I will charge more for content with the design. Development, so far, the kind of clients who've come to me haven't had specific complex requirements for development above and beyond, building a site. And lately, well, not lately, but past few months, I've started doing more development with ACF and making much more customized backends for their sites. But that is part of the work that I put in to make sure that they don't then come along and break the site. So I don't kind of factor that in as part of the development cost, because in a sense, it's my security against them doing something awful to the site.
Okay. If you've got any more questions for Vaughan, as always, hashtag UK Genesis on Twitter. and we will make sure that we get round to them. Perhaps it's time for, what do you think, Gary? Quick fire round?
Yeah, I was just going to
Put Vaughan
suggest
on
that.
the spot.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
I'm expecting a jingle here, you know, quick fire round, quick fire.
I don't know. I haven't got enough time to get round to the. Where is it now? Give it 2 seconds. It will come up. I'm sure there must be something on the Google effects. Come on, where are they? We can do this. We can do this. We can find it. Come on, Google. You can do this. Quick.
It should have been prepared before.
It should have been. There we go.
Oh my. Oh, that was a build.
Okay, so anyway, quick fire round. What did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was very young,
I wasn't all singing, all dancing, content and web creator.
No, when I was very young, I wanted to be a musician of some kind. Then, when I got older, I studied drama. I studied drama at university. How I fell into being working on the web is beyond me, but there you go. And I was interested in theatre directing. But I guess from after university, and when I started looking for work, it was something to do with writing and editorial, but I wasn't quite sure what. So, in a sense, I'm doing the kind of thing I like.
Okay. Mac or PC?
Mac since 2007. And I can't stand going back to PCs now.
I think that needs some sort of gang symbol there, like that. Mac for life. What code editor do you use if you use one at all?
Actually, I can do a surprising amount just using TextEdit because of my old days at BBC where I was often just editing stuff in Notepad. But my primary one is still Coda because I've been using Coda since it came out. I am looking at Sublime Text 3. I've got it. I want to use it more, but the fact is, I will admit, I will admit that I have no memory for keyboard shortcuts. I have a brain like a sieve when it comes to keyboard shortcuts, and Sublime Text seems to rely on a lot of them. So yeah. I'm a bit of a loss there. So at the moment, I'm sticking with Coda. I find it quite good.
Okay. What do you use for localhost? Do you develop locally, or do you, as Chris Coyer puts it, cowboy code?
My first couple of Genesis sites were done cowboy coding, and then I discovered Desktop Server. Now use Desktop Server. Develop locally, then put the site on a staging server for final testing before it goes on to the live site.
Okay, so that answers the next question as well. What do you use to design your sites? Do you use different things to design and do wireframes, or are they all the same thing?
I generally just use pen and paper for the kind of layout, basic layout like that, and I design in the browser. And part of the reason for that is I've kind of, again, I'm not from a graphic design background. I've never put sites together using Photoshop. It just wasn't my background. You know, I was in my work, I was kind of taking sites that had already been designed and coming up with new templates by building them in the browser. So to me, it's always felt really natural to build in the browser, design and build in the browser. I can, you know, if somebody gives me a Photoshop file, I can take the layers from that and build a site. But for actually designing and building myself, I suppose I'm quite lucky and I have quite a good visual brain. So kind of actually getting into the browser and designing feels more natural to me than the couple of occasions I've tried, you know, designing in Photoshop and then taking that onto the browser.
Do you not find it can sometimes result in scope creep? Oh, go on. I know you only need to change this 6-digit thing to see how it looks in black.
This is true. Yeah, it can. I would fully accept it can. But I guess when you get to that bit, I'm fortunately quite quick at that. So I find, no, I generally find for me it's perhaps at some point I should learn more about working in, well, now it would be Sketch rather than Photoshop, but at the moment it just feels so natural to me to design in the browser, particularly in, you know, this all new responsive world, that it kind of suits me.
Fair enough. What is your must-have plugin, or if you can't decide on one, what are your go-to plugins?
I actually wrote some of these down because I have terrible memory. Um,
Prepared.
ACF Pro, custom post type UI or types, desktop server, uh, a lot of the standard Genesis ones. So I've already mentioned Genesis Accessible and WP Accessibility, eNews Extended. I now use latest tweets widget instead of Genesis latest tweets. Genesis Sandbox featured content widget, simple share, simple sidebar. Oh, it's nothing. I don't think there's anything very unusual on my list of, use WordPress SEO, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Do you have a starter theme that you use when you're working with Genesis?
I think my answer might be quite similar to Angie's last week in that yes and no. In that I've got a starter theme, but it just keeps getting added to, and
That's what
then
starter theme is.
But yeah, but it's kind of I want to get it to a stage where it feels more. I know it'll keep being added to, but at the moment it's not at a stage where I feel I quite want to start a project with it. So I generally use either the sample theme or if there's a theme that I feel, one of the design themes I might use. So I'm quite keen on. I can't remember whether it's Executive or Enterprise Pro as a starter theme.
Slider or static?
Pardon?
Is it got the slider or is it static?
Um,
Enterprise has the static picture. It's Executive that has the slider.
I think it's Executive and I route the slider.
The one with those. Yeah, Enterprise then I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those two. So yeah, it's generally either the sample theme or choosing an appropriate theme to then change quite a bit.
Okay. Have you ever written a public plugin?
No.
Do you want to?
I doubt it.
Is that because
I
you're?
know my limitations. Yeah, I'm not primarily a developer. No.
Fair enough. I take it you've never written a public theme either, then?
No.
No.
Although I have had requests to use one of my designs as a theme, but they weren't willing to pay for it, so they can start off.
Fair enough. Is there anything that you would like to see changed in the Genesis framework, shall we say, to avoid repetition, not to do with accessibility?
I'd like to see either the removal or the improvement of the Genesis featured post and featured page widgets, because at the moment, I started using those originally and quickly found they weren't up to scratch for what I needed to do. So I now always use Genesis Sandbox featured content widget. But I'd either like an improvement on those widgets in Genesis Core, or just get rid of them and say, always download a plugin for that.
I'm right in thinking, Gary, that Brian has hinted that they will be depreciated in one of the upcoming versions.
Sorry, what will be?
The featured widget and the featured post. He's hinted at it, but
it's going to be difficult because it's something that obviously is used a lot. The breakout of the latest tweets widget and the e-news widgets were kind of mixed success. And although you might have hinted that it might happen, I've also seen that he said, well, doing that was a bit of a nightmare. The support requests and trying to get people to switch over to a plugin and so on was just awful for their support desk. So that they might just say, well, no, it's might not be the best one. There might be other featured post-page widgets for Genesis out there, but we'll keep it within Genesis Core. So that it might be deprecated, but it won't actually be deprecated for the reason that it's going to be removed. There's several reasons for deprecating code.
Fair enough. How much do you consider things like accessibility, internationalization, localization, and right-to-left scripts for when you're creating things for clients?
I I think partly the last three. No, I'm not really. I'm aware of them, but I don't really consider them. As you know, all my sites have been British, English. The accessibility, I must admit, I kind of, when I stopped working on the BBC's disability site, I lost track a bit of accessibility. I was quite aware of it early on, and it was very informative, you know, working every day with screen reader users and finding out how they use the web. So I have some knowledge from that, but I must admit I lost track a bit of accessibility when I went on to other work, and I need to improve my knowledge of that again. So I do have some knowledge of it. I'm aware of skip links. I'm aware of not putting title tags on every single graphic. All these kind of things. But yeah, I need to tighten up my knowledge of it. So yes, that's my answer.
Okay. And one last one that is a bit of a last-minute addition, not to throw you off, but would you consider presenting at Genesis Camp, which is, as we've mentioned in the past, a 24-hour conference or online conference that people from the Genesis community will be running. When is it again?
July 18th to 19th, 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't heard a lot about it. I haven't really got involved in it yet, I must admit. I haven't had the kind of headspace to consider that fully. It's something I'd consider, but I absolutely have no idea what I talk about, to be honest.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Anything you'd like to see presented?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. We've now entered the last 10 minutes of the show. If you've got any questions for Vaughan, get them in now, or you will have to wait until the next show. I guess it's just sort of asking really who would you like to see on the podcast in the near future?
Well, I've been thinking about this, and the obvious ones is that I think it's time the tables were turned and you and Gary were interviewed. But other than that, I'd like to see. I'm going to pronounce her surname wrong. Julia Sidnor of Pixelfrau.
Yeah, Julia Sidnor, I assume it's pronounced, yes.
Yes.
I haven't contacted her yet, but she is on my radar as being a potential.
Yeah, I'd like to get her take on things. That would be interesting. But otherwise, yes, I think the tables ought to be turned on you two.
I think our very first, our kind of episode 0, I think it was effectively...
It was interviewing with Gary, wasn't it?
Yeah, it kind of started off as, okay, well, we'll see who else turns up. We'll just have a chat, and it was kind of very much like a water cooler type thing. And so the first kind of 2 or 3 minutes is us basically doing nothing, just waiting to see anybody else turns up, and nobody did. So we then just started interviewing me for it, and completely unexpected, and just went for it.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can
arrange something like that for a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, we were discussing as well before the show about the idea of possibly doing some roundtables. I mean, are there any particular topics that you'd like to see, sort of there be a debate on amongst a group of UK Genesis users?
Yeah, I'd like to see a good debate on design and thoughts about design. Because I think there are some interesting takes on design, particularly since the design channel started up on Slack. There's been some interesting conversations about it there. I mean, just today there was the one about flat design. So I'd like to see some discussion about that, because I think, as I said earlier, when I discovered Genesis, one of the things that attracted me to it was, after I'd realised there was Genesis behind Dynamic, that was, the Studio Press themes do have a particular look, and it's quite an appealing look to someone who prefers minimalist design like me. But there are problems with that as well, in that a lot of clients don't actually want quite such a stripped down minimalist look. I mean, I've had a few clients who, when I presented them the initial version of a theme that I think, a design that I think looks beautiful, they say, well, it's all a bit plain, isn't it? And they want swirly backgrounds added and things like that. So yeah, I'd like to see a good discussion on design.
Okay, Gary, you had a question?
Yeah, just how do you see yourself and your business kind of moving forward in the next year, 3 years, 5 years? How do you want to progress? Do you want to kind of take on bigger clients and kind of grow yourself, the income, the bottom line, or just want to kind of carry along as you're doing? And how do you want to see your business change in the next year?
In the next year, I can't even contemplate 3 or 5 years, but in the next year, yes, I'd like to take on bigger projects, but I'd still like to, I don't know, sounds a bit weird, but I'd still like to do projects that ultimately interest me, that I feel I have some connection with. There have been some clients who approached me who I turned down because what they were doing, as much as the money would have been nice, it just didn't really grab me. So that is important to me. I mean, I had a client approach me a few months ago, a gun manufacturer, and that for me was just, no, I don't want to build a website for a gun manufacturer. Thanks very much. And it was good money, but unfortunately before Slack started up, so I couldn't offer it to anyone else. But yeah, I'd like to keep concentrating on things that I'm interested in. But yes, I would like to do bigger and obviously from that point of view more profitable sites. But I think to do that, I'd like to at some point link up formally or informally with somebody whose specialism is development, because I know that's where I'm lacking. That's where I've developed, if you'd excuse the pun, quite a bit. But I'm at the top end of probably what I can do, and I'm interested in doing in development now. So ultimately, I think over the next year it would be to link up formally or informally with the developer with a view to taking on bigger projects.
Good stuff. Excellent. Any more questions, Ben?
No, although there is one from Richard. He just managed to get one in. Do you have any design heroes?
I suppose I mean, obviously I was struck by the Studio Press things when I discovered them, and I do like what was originally, I mean, I know the senior design has changed now, but I did like Brian Gardner's aesthetic. I like I've forgotten his name. There's two. One German name and I've forgotten it. But the other one is, I think it's Mike McAllister, who does array themes. I think he produces very very nice themes and ones that I've quite admired. And yeah, I guess that would be those would be the main ones. And I say this German bloke whose name I've forgotten. Sorry, German bloke.
Fair enough. I suppose actually one other question that came up, I think it was either on the Genesis UK, Genesis WordPress Facebook group, or it might have been WordPress designers. Where do you get your inspiration from? Are there any particular go-to websites or go-to books or anything like that that you look at when you're trying to work out, sort of what approach to take and what to, sort of design it like? Obviously not steal, because stealing is naughty.
No. No, I don't. I mean, I use Pocket for, bookmarking links, and I have, although I keep forgetting to tag things, I have one called Design, where I bookmark interesting designs. But I find, I mean, there are some very good sites that list inspiring designs on a frequent basis. I mean, the site Inspire, for instance. But although I like a lot of their stuff, I think a lot of the sites they tend to highlight are designers' sites themselves, and I think the problem is designers' sites have very particular designs. You know, they tend to be ultra minimalist and that kind of thing, which isn't something that always appeals to clients. So no one particular place. I tend to see things and remember it and make a note of it, and if it's something that's appropriate to the design. But ultimately, it comes back to what's appropriate for the client and discussing with the client. I have done some sites which are totally outside what I'd normally do. So I did one for a community jazz band in London, which they had their publicity materials all ready to go, and it was all kind of very bright colours, graffiti-based wall background, all this kind of thing. Absolutely not the kind of thing I'd do, but it was right for their site because it fit in with their tone and materials. So, no, not one particular inspiration.
Okay. Right, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. We have James Roberts from Llama Press on the next show. Before we go, though, Vaughan, where can people find you online?
They can find me at pilcrowandpixel.com. They can find me on Slack as pilcrowpixel or Vaughan Simons. They can find me I've got a Facebook business page, not much used, and they can find me on Twitter as pilcrowpixel, and LinkedIn as well, for what it's worth.
Okay, well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. As we said, in a fortnight we have James Roberts on, so if you have any questions for James, do drop them into the Twitter feed and we will get round to them. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you in a fortnight.
Thank you, Vaughan.
Thank you.